At Christmas, Aunt joked. You turned out fine though. And my prescription bottle rattled in my coat pocket. I felt it knock against my phone as I shifted in my chair. That tiny plasticky clink that sounded deafening to me and completely inaudible to everyone else. Her laugh lingered in the air, joined by a couple of polite chuckles from down the table. The fairy lights Mom had taped around the archway flickered in my peripheral vision. I stared at my plate. Ham, overcooked green beans, mashed potatoes I'd stirred for her half an hour ago in that same kitchen where I'd once had my first panic attack, and tried to decide if I was going to smile, make a joke back, or finally say the thing I'd been swallowing for years. It was the first Christmas I'd come home since I'd started meds. The first one since I'm just tired turned into I can't stop crying on public transport, and then into so we're going to start you on a small dose first and see how you go. I'd spent most of December rehearsing this exact scenario in my head. The inevitable minimizing comment, the laughter at my dramatic phase. The way my family turns my worst nights into funny stories about how emotional I've always been. But sitting there with a paper crown digging into my forehead and Aunt Claire's wine-sweet breath wafting across the table, the script I'd practiced scattered like the torn cracker paper on the tablecloth. We do Christmas at my parents' house every year. Same cheap red tablecloth with the wax stain from that time Dad knocked over a candle. Same mismatched set of chairs because Mom keeps insisting they're perfectly good. Same artificial tree in the corner with bald spots we turn toward the wall. When I was a kid, it was magic. Tinsel and sugar and staying up late. As an adult, it's like walking onto a stage where everyone already knows their lines except me. This year, the cast included my parents, obviously. Aunt Claire, my mom's younger sister who lives 20 minutes away and drinks like she still hasn't accepted she's in her 50s. Uncle Mike, my brother Matt and his girlfriend, my grandparents, and me, the prodigal sensitive one who moved 2 hours away and only comes back for big things now. Weddings, funerals, Christmas, the occasional guilt-drenched birthday. I hadn't planned on telling them about the meds. I mean, my therapist thinks secrecy feeds shame, blah blah, but my therapist also hasn't met my father. Mom knew, sort of. She knew I'd been having a hard time, and that I was seeing someone. In her mind, that meant I'd gone to 3 therapy sessions, cried about some things, and would now be returning to my regular programming of pretending everything was fine. The word medication never sat well on her tongue when I tried to say it in my head in her voice. The only reason we were even on the topic of mental health at Christmas was because of my cousin Jess. She couldn't make it. Stuck in another city, no car, train's a mess. So she'd FaceTimed us from her tiny kitchen. She'd been talking about how much better she was feeling since starting antidepressants. Honestly, best decision I ever made. 10 out of 10 would recommend. In her very Jess way, Mom had done that tight-lipped smile she does for anything vaguely uncomfortable. Dad said, "Well, good for you," in the tone he uses for things he thinks are slightly pathetic but technically acceptable. And Aunt Claire, ever the conversational arsonist, laughed and said, "God, everyone's on something these days. In our day, we just got on with it." Jess, to her credit, didn't flinch. "You also used asbestos and smoked in hospitals," she shot back. "Not everything about your day was better." Everyone laughed at that, including me. It loosened something in my chest. I flushed, smiling at my cousin's tiny head on the screen. Felt like she'd cracked the door open and left it ajar. After the call ended and Mom put the phone down, the table buzzed with little side conversations. That's when Mom looked over at Aunt Claire and, in this half-laughing, half-exasperated tone, said, "Well, you turned out fine though, didn't you? No pills, no therapy, just pure stubbornness." Aunt Claire grinned, lifted her wine glass and said, "Exactly, stiff upper lip. Besides, look at the kids." She gestured vaguely at me and Matt. "They turned out fine though." The sentence hit me in the chest before my brain had a chance to filter it. My thumb rubbed unconsciously against the pill bottle through my coat, feeling the grooves of the child-proof cap. My heart did that tiny misfire it does now when I'm about to speak truth in this house. Fine. Fine with my carefully counted pills and the 3 months I'd spent last year waking up at 3 a.m. Convinced I was drowning. Fine with my emergency psych clinic visit after I texted my friend, I don't want to be here anymore, and scared both of us enough to call the hotline. Fine, with the way my hands still shook every time Dad raised his voice slightly, even if he was just yelling at the TV. I forked some potatoes into my mouth and chewed slowly, partly to buy time, partly because my throat felt like sandpaper. The table noise dimmed around the edges. My therapist's voice floated up like a caption on the scene. You're allowed to say, "It wasn't fine for me." Yeah, I heard myself say, before I'd fully decided to. So fine that I had a breakdown in the Kohl's cereal aisle last year because they were out of my usual muesli. Heads turned. Mom's first, Matt's second, Aunt Claire's last, slow, the way you turn toward a sound you're not sure you heard right. What? Mom laughed a little too loud. Don't be dramatic. I'm not, I said. I sat on the floor between the Wheat Bix and the cornflakes and cried so hard a staff member asked if I'd lost someone. Lost someone? Aunt Claire repeated, frowning. As in a person, I said. Like dead. She thought someone had died. That's how bad I was crying over cereal. That was the day my doctor said we should talk about medication. Silence rolled over the table like thick fog. The only sound was the crackle of wrapping paper under someone's elbow and the faint buzz of the fridge in the next room. You're on pills, Mom said at last, her voice dropping on the last word like it was something shameful. I took a breath. Yeah, I said. Have been for 6 months. Aunt Claire broke the silence with a scoff. Oh, sweetheart, she said, shaking her head. You've always been sensitive. You just need to toughen up a bit. Life's hard. We didn't have the luxury of... She wiggled her fingers vaguely. Little happy tablets. The laugh that bubbled up in me was half hysterical. They're not happy tablets, I said. They're please don't let me climb into bed and stay there for 3 weeks straight tablets. Dad cleared his throat. Let's not ruin dinner with this kind of talk, he said, reaching for the gravy. He said it like we'd started discussing politics or religion, not my mental health. And that's when Aunt Claire said it. You turned out fine, though. The part of me that's still 15, shaking on the bathroom floor while my parents argue about money in the next room, wanted to shrink under the table. The part that's 28 and very, very tired imagined standing up, clinking my fork against my glass, and giving a small speech. Hi. I did not, in fact, turn out fine. Instead, I pressed my thumb harder into the pill bottle until the cap dug into my skin. I didn't, I said quietly. What? Mom asked. I lifted my head. My voice came out clearer than I expected. I didn't turn out fine, I repeated. That's kind of the point. Aunt Claire rolled her eyes. Oh, here we go, she muttered. I could feel every pair of eyes at the table on me. My cheeks burned hot. My heart was beating too fast, but it was the adrenaline kind of fast, not the panic kind. There's a difference I only learned recently. You all tell this story? I said, gesturing between them, about how we're this tough, resilient family. How we don't complain, we just get on with it. You say I turned out fine like there weren't years where I couldn't breathe properly because I was so anxious. Like I wasn't cutting myself in high school. Like I didn't almost drop out of uni because I slept through half my exams. Excuse me, Dad said sharply. There it was. Secret exposed. Cat, meet daylight. Mom's eyes went wide in a way I recognized from childhood. It's the way she looks when someone knocks over something expensive. What do you mean, cut yourself? She hissed, as if saying it quietly would make it less true. I swallowed. I hadn't planned to go here, but now that the dam had cracked, everything was pushing through at once. I started in year 9, I said. Stopped around first year uni. I thought you knew. Of course we didn't know, she snapped. How could you say that? Because, I said slowly, I was living in your house and wearing long sleeves in summer and taking 20-minute showers and coming out with red eyes, and you never asked why. You just told me to hurry up. Other people needed the bathroom. That's not fair, Dad cut in. We were working. We were busy. We can't read your mind, for God's sake. I didn't need you to read my mind, I said. I needed you to notice when I wasn't okay. Aunt Claire poured herself more wine. Everyone's not okay at that age, she said. Teenagers are dramatic. God knows I wanted to disappear a few times. You grow out of it. I looked at her. I didn't grow out of it, I said. I grew into a 20-something who had to sit in a doctor's office and admit she'd been thinking about stepping in front of a train. Mom gasped. Grandma made a strangled little "oh" sound. Matt, across the table, went very, very still. Jesus Christ, Emma, Dad said. Do you have any idea what you're saying? Yes, I said. For once, I do. There was a long pause. I could feel the moment teetering on an edge. Either it would tip into one of those everything changes arguments, or it would slam shut and we'd all go back to pretending. I had no control over which way it went. All I could control was whether I stayed standing on my side of the truth. Why didn't you tell us? Mom whispered. Her eyes were shiny, but I recognized the subtext. Why didn't you give us the opportunity to perform being good parents about it? I did, I said, and my voice shook now. I tried. When I was 16 and I told you I couldn't sleep and my heart wouldn't stop pounding, you said I was drinking too much coffee and spending too much time on my phone. When I told you uni was overwhelming and I cried every time I had to go in, you said, everyone gets stressed, that's life. When I said I thought something was wrong with me, you told me to stop being negative. That's not the same as this, Mom protested. No, I agreed, because I didn't have the words back then. I just had symptoms, so they lived in my body instead of out loud. Aunt Claire snorted. Well, I still think we mollycoddle young people too much, she said. Back in my day, my dad would have told me to pull myself together. I turned to her. And were you okay? I asked. Pulling yourself together? She opened her mouth, then closed it. A flicker of something crossed her face. Anger, then something like fear, then the shutters came down. I'm fine, she said. Look at me. I did. I looked at the permanent tightness in her jaw, the way her fingers tapped the stem of her wineglass, the way she laughed too loud at every not that funny joke. I believed she was fine. I didn't believe the story. I'm glad you feel fine, I said, because it was the only thing I could offer her without lying. But I'm not you. Grandma, who'd been silent so long I'd almost forgotten she was there, cleared her throat. People didn't talk about these things in our day, she said softly. You just coped, however you could. Exactly, Aunt Claire said, seizing on it. We coped. Some people coped, Grandma replied, in that deceptively mild tone she uses when she's about to say something important. Some people drank. Some people hit their kids. Some people died. The table went still. Grandma almost never acknowledges anything ugly. She's the queen of, oh, let's not dwell on that. Hearing her say, hit their kids out loud, in this house, felt like the floor had shifted 2 inches to the left. That's enough, Mom, Dad said quickly. She looked at him, then back at me. I'm not saying I understand all this, she said, waving a hand vaguely to indicate therapy and medication and suicidal thoughts. But I know keeping quiet didn't help anybody in my generation. Maybe talking will help yours. Tears pricked my eyes. Thank you, I said. Mom pushed her chair back abruptly. I can't sit here and listen to you say we failed as parents, she said, blinking furiously. I didn't say that, I replied. I said I didn't turn out fine. There's a difference. To us, it sounds the same, Dad said. I thought about that, about how any mention of pain, any suggestion that things were less than ideal, always translated to them as an accusation of failure. They heard, I'm hurting as you're bad. I'm not doing this to punish you, I said, softer now. I'm doing it because pretending I'm okay nearly killed me. I need a different story. On Christmas, Mom demanded. You need a different story on Christmas? I actually laughed then, because of course that's what she'd latch onto. There's never a good time to tell your family you wanted to die, Mom, I said. You keep saying you want me to come home more and not be so distant. But you only want the parts of me that fit the picture you have in your head. Matt finally spoke. He said quietly. I didn't know it was that bad. I looked at him. For a second, we were kids again, whispering in our bunk beds while our parents fought downstairs. He looked genuinely shaken, the color gone from his face. "I didn't want you to know," I said. "You had enough on your plate." He swallowed. "I'm sorry. My throat burned." "You don't have to apologize," I said. "You didn't do anything." Dad stood up, the way he always does when he can't handle emotional conversations. "I'm going to get some air," he muttered, and walked out onto the back deck, sliding the glass door closed with more force than necessary. Mom followed him with her eyes, then looked back at me. "I just wish you'd come to us before it got to that," she said, voice shaking. "We would have helped." The urge to scream was loud in my chest. When I was 16 and you told me to pray more. When I was 20 and you said everyone hates their job, that's life. When I was 24 and you rolled your eyes at my first attempt to talk about anxiety. "I did come to you," I said again. "In little ways." I didn't have the words depression and anxiety yet, but I came to you. And you told me I'd be fine if I just pushed through. She shut her eyes, as if my words were bright lights. "We did our best," she whispered. "I know," I said. "I know you did your best with what you had. But your best still left me here." I tapped my chest lightly. "With this brain, with these memories, with this prescription." I heard the bottle rattle again when I shifted, like a punctuation mark. We didn't resolve anything that night. There was no big hug, no group apology, no hallmark moment where everyone promised to do better. Dad stayed outside for a long time. When he came back in, eyes red, he changed the subject to the cricket scores and refused to look at me. Mom busied herself with dishes, banging them a little louder than necessary. Aunt Claire poured more wine and told a story about a colleague who'd faked a mental health issue for time off, just to balance out the heaviness, as if such a thing was needed. Grandma dozed in her chair, mouth slightly open. Later, when I was alone in my old bedroom, surrounded by relics of who they thought I still was, debate trophies, a faded poster of some band I don't even listen to anymore, I sat on the edge of the bed and took my tablet with a sip of water from a chipped mug. My hand shook, but I swallowed it. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Jess. "How's the circus?" I laughed, painfully. "Just performed a one-woman show called Surprise. I wanted to die." "Mixed reviews," I typed back. She replied with a string of skull emojis and then, "I'm proud of you, speaking up. That stuff is hard." I stared at those words for a long time. Proud of you. I hadn't heard that phrase used about anything real for a long time. My parents said it about grades, jobs, promotions. Never about survival. Certainly never about hearing "you turned out fine" and saying, "No, I didn't. I don't know what happens from here." I'd love to say that Christmas was the turning point, that my parents signed up for a family therapy session and Aunt Claire quietly went to AA and we all started saying depression out loud without flinching. What actually happened is more mundane. Mom sent me a long text 2 days later saying she'd been thinking about our conversation and that she never meant to make me feel like I couldn't talk, followed by, "I just worry the tablets will change who you are." Dad stayed silent except for a request to help him with his tax return. Aunt Claire liked exactly 3 of my photos on Facebook and then shared a meme about snowflake generations. But small cracks appeared. When I told Mom I couldn't come home the next weekend because I had therapy on Saturday, she didn't roll her eyes. She just said, "Okay," and asked how the weather was in my city. Matt called me out of the blue and, after talking about work and his dog, said, "If you ever feel like that again, the train thing, call me. Okay?" His voice wobbled. I still flinch when someone says, "You turned out fine," like it's a compliment. I still sit in my car for a minute before going into their house, breathing through the smell of old carpet and roast meat and air freshener that sends me right back to being 12. But I also carry that little orange bottle without shame now. I don't hide it when I visit. I put it by the bathroom sink with my toothbrush, like it's just another thing that keeps me functioning. At Christmas, Aunt joked, "You turned out fine though," and my prescription bottle rattled in my coat pocket. For the first time, I didn't take her comment as a verdict I'd failed or an accusation that I was ungrateful. I heard it for what it was. A story she tells herself so she doesn't have to look too closely at the cracks in our family. I can't make her change that story. I can't make my parents rewrite theirs overnight either. But I can write mine. It's messier and darker and a lot less flattering. And it includes words like depression and anxiety, and almost didn't make it. It also includes medication, therapy, and still here. Fine isn't the bar anymore. Alive, honest, and slowly, clumsily healing. That's where I'm aiming. And if that makes Christmas more awkward, so be it.